Hola, amigos of the Latino Chamber of Commerce of Boulder County. My name is Carla Colin. We are recording part of this session because we want to make sure that everyone in our contacts has access to this important message that we have to share with you. We are going to be talking about how to build a resume and a good cover letter so you can get the job of your dreams. So this is something that we are doing through Zoom. We are not live broadcasting on Facebook today, but this video is going to be on our YouTube channel and Facebook in the upcoming days. And we have a few guests here that are going to be supporting me with this topic. And we are going to be talking about the key points for a remarkable cover letter and how to build a good resume. So we're going to start. And a remarkable cover letter is a well-crafted document that introduces you to a potential employer and showcases your skills and qualifications. We are going to take a look at some key points to keep in mind when writing a cover letter. But basically, with a cover letter, you tell your potential employer or the employer or hiring manager that for the job that you're trying to apply, that you are the right person, that there is no one better than you, and that you are the person that they need to hire. Otherwise, they're going to be missing without being arrogant or mean, right? But you have to show your skills from the cover letter. And talking from the experience of working with HR, I've seen many HR managers taking a look at the cover letter and not even reviewing the resume because the cover letter didn't tell them enough of that person or if that person could do the job 100%. So that's something that you need to take into consideration. A lot of hiring managers or recruiters won't see your resume if your cover letter is not good enough for them. So just keep that in mind. So we're going to start with the key points. And John, I don't know if you want to take us through this slide with the key points that we have here.
Yeah, definitely. So personalization, so you got to take into consideration who you are making this out to. Depends on the organization or the type of business you are applying for. So I think that you got to take that into consideration with everything that you add in there so that you always put relevant information. That's why it's always good to maybe touch up your resume a little bit and really customize it to that specific organization or company. Um, the other thing too, and this is for cover letters, if I'm not mistaken, right, Carla? The other thing too that I would like to add to that is that the cover letter is really important because it helps you explain why you want that job specifically and maybe why you have the skills for that job, even though they might not be related. So I'll give you an example. So when I was applying to this job at E4All, this was my first office job. So what I tried to do is highlight some of my life experiences um, to help me explain why I would want to work for a company that helps underserved communities start businesses. Um, with that being said, I would highlight, for example, one of the things that I highlighted in my cover letter is like customer service would be a good one, just because you have customer service at Whole Foods where I was working at, and then I translated that to how customer service was going to be good, well, was going to be a good skill that I have for this new job. Um, I, the show enthusiasm, I would say that you got to be a little bit careful with that. You don't want to sound too casual with your cover letter, but there should be some level of like professionalism and formalism. I don't know if that's a right word. Um, and then, for example, provide examples to illustrate your skills. So the company that I work for helps undocumented people start businesses through a course. And one of the examples that I showed in my cover letter was, well, I kind of painted a picture of a memory that I had when I was younger, and I was translating free lunch form for my parents, and how that kind of shaped the way that I am and how I interact with the Latino community and why I am the right person because I understand where they're coming from. So I'm not sure if that makes too much sense or if that paints a good picture.
No, I think that that makes sense. And with using a specific examples, it doesn't have to be anything long. It can be just short and sweet, just telling people like, this is why um, I would have the skills that I need for this position. And we have other points that we want to touch base on with the cover letter. But I don't know if Jim or Esteban have anything else to add on these first 5 points that we've seen in this slide.
I would say when you're talking about the transferability of your skills, think of the verbs that you use, right? Like just like use the word, these skills transfer, right? Like think of other words that mean transfer. These skills are the same, things like that. Just, it sounds funny, but think about how you describe the similarities between what you know how to do and how it will apply to another job.
Correct. Thank you so much, Esteban. And let's go to the next slide. So this slide give us a couple more points of how to build a good cover letter. Customize. I've also seen people that apply to a job with a generic cover letter that don't say a lot about how they can be an asset to the company they're applying to. That is a big no-no, because you're not telling the employer what skills are good for this position. You're telling the employer that you're good for the job, but not for this specific position. So never use a generic cover letter, or never apply with the same cover letter to different jobs, even if they're the same title. Customize your cover letter to the position and the company that you're trying to work at, because it's not the same and I'm gonna put the example of my title. It's not the same to apply for a program manager position at a nonprofit organization that to a program manager position at a food factory. It's completely different. You have to customize your cover letter. Keep it concise. Keep your cover letter to 1 page or less. I've seen cover letters of 2 or 3 pages. It's exhausting. You can only imagine how many people apply to the same position, and imagine a hiring manager reading 2 or 3 page cover letter plus 2 or 3 page resume. That's exhausting, and they're not even gonna read it, to be honest. They're gonna ignore it. So just concise, and you don't have to put your whole life experience, but make sure that you put the important parts. So proofread it. Check your letter for spelling and grammar errors. Have someone else check it for you. Have a friend or a mentor check it for you, so you don't submit a cover letter and a resume with grammar errors or spelling errors. Close with a call to action, like, I'm ready to hit the ground running for this position. And your letter with a clear call to action, such as requesting an interview or expressing your desire to speak further about this position. That's something that is going to make a huge difference, because they're going to notice right away that you are ready to start this new job. I don't know, Jim, do you have anything to add on this part?
Thank you, Carla. I'm glad I waited on the previous page, because I really liked seeing the call to action. I would emphasize, you mentioned, saying things like you're ready to start. I agree. But I would say that requesting an interview is not a such as. I think that's really the most important part of your close. That is the call to action, unless you want something else. I think most people, though, with a letter, that is your next step. If you have a resume cover letter, you're sending them in the hope that they will want to interview. That's almost always the next step. They're not going to hire you just from the letter. So it also shows that you understand this is a process, right? This has steps. I hate to say it, but I make the analogy to dating. You don't get married on the first date. Well, some people do, but it's, you know, it's unusual, and it's really more of a process, and it's a two-way process. You're introducing yourself. You're saying, I would like to meet you in person, and or it could actually be by Zoom, right? But I would like to have a further discussion. You might, such as, it kind of depends on the job and the company, but you could also include that you want the interview to discuss your qualifications, but also potentially to learn more about the specifics. It kind of depends there on how much is in the job description and so forth. And since you're going to do a little bit more on cover letter, I'm going to hold back on one other comment. I'll make sure I do it before you get to the resume is all.
Yeah, I think that's.
Did that make sense, Paulina?
Paulina, do you have
sorry.
any questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
no, I'm not. I had a question. I have a question, but I can ask now, or you can answer later about the graphics, because I remember you share some links with a lot of templates, and I've seen plain with no colors or graphics, so I'm just confused. What's the best option?
Yeah, we can talk, or Jim might be able to answer that for you.
I can give a first answer to that. I think that's a good question, and it doesn't always have one right answer. It's a little bit of the context, but the way I would approach it is, for most situations, the best thing you can introduce to kind of make your resume stand out is not really a graphic. There are some design elements. So you want it to be beautiful in the sense that you want it to have clean lines and so forth. The graphic element for me would be color, because color is not the same as introducing, there are so many possible graphics. And for example, some people will put their picture on a resume. And I think for most jobs, that's a mistake, unless you are a model or an actor, or maybe in sales, actually. So if you're a realtor, realtors will often have their pictures in things. So if you're dealing with that kind of interface, maybe, but in general, I would say not to include a photo, and not to get too fancy with the graphics, but having your header in a color and then I think the color choice is fairly important too. You have to remember that some people will print it in black and white no matter what you do. And so things like a yellow might not print very well. I personally tend to use blues. Even different shades of gray will still give it, I understand why people want graphics. I understand and it works on slides. I mean, we're looking at a slide here that's got a great design. It's got a small graphic, but that's a way of doing continuity from slide to slide. So I would say the elements that you have to play with would be potentially the color, but also your use of bold in the header, for example, and a larger font. What I notice is a lot of people, their name is very small at the top. Mine is huge.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in an ego way, but that you're looking at my resume. You are not going to forget my name. And that's true on a cover letter. I have a slightly different way of including my name, but you're going to see my contact information that's small and my name that's larger and potentially in bold. On the resume, it would be bold. And then even in the cover letter, you might want to use bullet points as another way of separating or setting things off. I want to wait on that comment until we get into the building piece, because you might be covering some of that, Carla. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for those comments.
Yeah.
They're very helpful. And after we are done with this part, I want to share my cover letter and a cover letter that I used and a resume, so we can take a look at it and then give some example. John, do you want to talk to us about the trending topic everywhere?
Yeah,
AI.
Yeah, definitely. I think AI, specifically ChatGPT, has been one of my favorite tools. It basically can do anything, and I really do mean that. You just kind of have to learn how to interact with it. I think this is an excellent tool for everybody that's working on their resume and on their cover letter, because there is an option where it can help you paraphrase certain parts that you're having trouble with. So I use it more for paraphrasing more than writing a whole cover letter. So I highly suggest you check this out, Paulina. Um, Anything you need with writing. For me specifically, I know English is my second language, so it's a lot harder for me to write in English. And I have found this tool to be amazing. Not only that, it's actually helped me improve my writing, because I would write things down and then I would paraphrase it, and then it would kind of teach me on the correct way to phrase things. So I love this tool, Paulina, and I highly recommend you look into it. It's also really good for translating from Spanish to English and vice versa.
Yeah, that is a
And
great point, John. And I wanted to, Paulina, sorry, you wanted to.
no, I'm sorry. Is that a website?
Yeah, I can put the link down on the chat so you can have it.
Okay, thank you.
But it's just a tool, and it's free, and it's honestly, it's gonna help you a lot.
So artificial intelligence is something that is trending and that it is being used a lot. And something that John mentioned is that it helps you paraphrase sentences or whole paragraphs, especially when you are bilingual and you tend to repeat. Like I do this a lot. I tend to repeat the same words to explain something in a paragraph, but I see and I notice that it doesn't look good. It doesn't look professional enough if I repeat the same word over and over again. So that's how I use this artificial intelligence chat GPT to help me paraphrase or give me ideas. Before chat GPT, I used to look for synonyms of these words. Like what's the next word that can mean the same thing but look different. So that's something that I used to use. And I want to ask Esteban. Esteban, do you have anything to add to this part when it comes to writing the cover letter and how you use other tools?
About Chat GPT and that, you know, I haven't really made up my. I mean, I always like progress and all of that, so I think it's cool. I think it's a useful tool. I think some things, you know, have to be so organic, like so much from the person. It just depends on what the purpose of the writing is, right? That I don't think like AI could ever write it, no matter how unless AI became sentient and then could just, you know, pretend to be people, actually pretend to be people, and could deceive people that way. Yeah. Is that too much?
No, I think that's a great point. What we want to encourage people to do with this artificial intelligence is obviously always double check what you're getting from it. But also, if you're not sure about something or you want to learn a different way to say something, use these type of tools. Because I would write a whole cover letter like in Spanish. Like I can be great at it, and I can sometimes be too much. I'll do it too long. But then I'll ask ChatGPT to paraphrase it for me, because I notice that in English I'm repeating the same word over and over again. Like, how do I change that on my resume? So yeah, it can be a great tool, but also I understand what you're saying, Esteban. It's hard to go 100% with it. You have to make sure that you're not forgiving about the human part of submitting an application. And we have Eric that joined us here. Eric, do you have anything to add about artificial intelligence or a good component of a cover letter?
Yeah, sorry for my technical difficulties. For some reason, I can't get in my desktop. So, but anyway, here I am on my iPad. Yeah, actually, first of all, so ChatGPT is one of the AI. So you could also look at Bing's. Bing also has one, and also you could look at Bard, which is Google's. So you could also look at, you know, different ones. So I'd encourage people to look at different ones, because they're all maybe slightly different and use some different intelligence or some different algorithms to come up with some stuff. Actually, I think it's such a great future as far as how things are going to work, and it's just going to keep learning upon itself. Not that it's sentient at all, but I think it's going to be a great tool for the future. And then as far as a cover letter, I think what Jim said about an action is really important at the end. I always end a cover letter with something like, I would welcome the opportunity to speak with you. kind of like an invitation to like welcome, or, you know, something that just sounds really warm and friendly, but yet action oriented. I think is just a really nice way to kind of close a cover letter.
That is a great point. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we're gonna go to our next slide. And these are our 10 steps to write a resume. I know that this might not be it. I wanted to do it concise and make sure that it wasn't gonna take too long. But I'm gonna start with these, and please, our mentors here, feel free to interrupt me at any time in case you wanna add something, or if anyone has a question, please feel free to open your mic. So the 10 steps to write a resume: add your contact information. Don't forget about that. I've seen emails coming, printing the resume and like no contact information. Maybe the name is there, but no phone number, no email. And especially when you're not the person receiving the email directly, it's hard to be tracking everything. So make sure that your cover letter and resume include your contact information. Include a professional summary. This is exactly what I was talking about. If I want to sound professional, but I notice that because English is my second language, I'm repeating one word too many times. This is a great way to use artificial intelligence, or to have a friend double check it for you. Add your work experience. This is something that I do, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric or Jim or Esteban. I put my last 3 or 4 jobs, but I don't pull my whole work experience. I've seen resumes with people putting their experience since 1985. And it's hard because the resume ended up being 4 pages long, and you don't go back that much. So you care about what's the most recent thing. I don't know if it's per job experience or per how many years back. What would you recommend? I don't know, Jim, if you have something.
Yeah, I'll take it, but I'm happy to hear other opinions. I don't mean to think that I have the only opinion, but when I've taught this, a couple of points. One, sometimes it is industry specific, or at least industry dependent. So, and I'm not a good guide on this one. I work in higher education. We love long resumes. I have had job applications where I was required more or less to write a 5-page cover letter. And I frankly didn't really have enough experience sometimes to fill that 5 pages. But and the resume is kind of the same thing. But I think you're pointing in the right direction here, Carla. What I would say is one sort of general guide, and again, maybe not for every industry, is 1 page for about every 10 years of professional experience. But what you include, I think your point about the more recent experiences, for most employers, that is going to be more relevant, unless you have, look, people have different gaps in their careers. I certainly had a gap in mine here and there. And if your previous experience may have been more relevant for a particular way, I wouldn't be too shy about including more about it. But generally speaking, what I do is, because I do have basically 30 years plus, and sometimes I will have my resume for higher ed was longer, but it would be tough for me to summarize all my experience and have a few other sections in 1 page. I've done it, but usually what I do, even in a longer resume, is those early jobs will be the title, the company, the company I work for, the title, the years I worked. And for those, by the time I get to the end, it's sort of a 1 line, here's what I did here. I'm trying to encapsulate the entire job in 1 line, but I usually manage to do that. Whereas my more recent or my current job will have, much more detail. So I know that's a little long-winded, but I think you're in the right direction, Carla. And I'm trying to think. So for example, if you are, well, I think I've seen a little bit of this in my own work and this is for students who are going into certain fields. But I think in general, if you were going into manufacturing, it really depends on your skill set. So if you're talking about a skill set like, I'll give you a couple of examples. One is So there's computer numerically controlled machining, which is, there's a lot of manufacturing now, by the way, that's very high tech, but I still don't think that manufacturers want the same length resume as other employers when they're looking at whether it's engineers who are very high end or, shop workers. If it's CNC, they're still going to want to see that technical skill, but they're not necessarily going to want to see a lengthy resume. Right. I've seen it for optics technology where they're working in clean rooms and they're working with extremely high sensitive laboratory equipment, that sort of thing, versus say a job in accounting or a job in marketing. A job in marketing is probably going to want, more writing, honestly, and more, but not necessarily to be longer, but just, to describe more accomplishments and those kinds of things. So, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself. You talk about including keywords, relevant though to describing your experience. I mentioned earlier, I would put my name, I would put the name of the firm, the title of my job, the beginning and ending. For me, it's usually the beginning, year, and month, and beginning and ending year and month. I don't get any more specific than that. And sometimes people just give the year. But the key thing for the content underneath that, whether it's one bullet point or 5, is that I try to make each bullet an action, something I did, not I was the manager of market research, which is in the title anyway. So I'm not just going to say, well, I manage market research projects. I'm going to think more about what things did I do? Yeah. What, and ideally, if you can focus on, yes, what did you accomplish? And if you can make it, impactful, this is what I accomplished. And this was the benefit or the impact to the business. So I worked in management consulting, for example. Oh, Paulina, go ahead. You have a question.
Oh, no, but you can finish to
okay.
talk. In the...
So, and yeah, this is a little weird, but I worked in management consulting, and it was both possible and for the professions I was going to, valuable for me to say, not only did I accomplish a project, but I could point to the impact that my project had on the client. I improved their market share. I improved customer satisfaction, which led to higher sales. I point to a few examples where there was a direct impact on their return on investment and those sorts of, things that really get people's attention in management. I can't say that I could do that for every job, but I could still look at the impact. So my last job was at Front Range, and I haven't actually really summarized everything about that, but I know what the impact was that some of the things I did. So I'd focus on that. So yeah, just that work experience can be hard to write, but you have an impact, you have actions, and so just saying responsible for opening the store, or responsible for customer service or something like that. If it's that kind of job, you still want to talk about what you did to satisfy customers. You handled complaints, you determined refunds, and made decisions about things. Those kinds of things just have more value than saying I manage the customer service desk or something like that, right? And I'm not saying that that's not an important thing. I think it's a very important thing, but you make it real to somebody when you actually say, yeah, but I did all these things. I wasn't just sitting at a desk.
Correct. So, yeah, that's true. And I also think about the accomplishments and the experience with thinking, where was the company when I came? When I'm leaving or when I left, where did the company move to? So comparing maybe, for example, here with the chamber, maybe the memberships grew 40%. So that's something that you can mention too, an impact on percentage or number that can tell people, thanks to the work she or he did, there was a difference in numbers. So that's something that I also think about. And Paulina, let's go with your question.
Yeah, so my question is about number 5, the skills, the relevant skills. And how would you recommend, or what do you recommend or how to find those skills that they are going to be the most important for X job? Like, do you have some people probably won't realize that have some skills that they are applicable, and so how do you do that research to find the correct skills that might help you to get that specific job?
That's a great question, Paulina. And I have a suggestion here that I've done in the past, is that when I cannot think about the skills that I have for a certain position, I always Google the position, like what skills are needed for this position. And then Google tells me all these skills. And from the list of skills that Google tells me, I pick the ones that I think are important, but also obviously the ones that I have, that I consider myself, because sometimes it's a little bit hard of telling what you're good at and describing your skills. But if you check either the job description or ask Google what skills are relevant for X position, then you'll get an idea. Like if, for example, we're talking about, communication skills and you're good at that, you can put that. If we're talking about managing big groups and you're good at that, or you've had experience, you can do that. And things like that. But that's my own experience, and that's what I do. And this is the part on the resume that I always try to change, even if it's the same skills, but I see that the importance of skills can be in a different order. I change them on my resume because I see that the position or the organization that I'm applying to is a different organization and is looking or cares more about the different skills that were listed at the very bottom of my resume. I put them on the very top, and like that. So Eric, do you have something to share with us?
Yeah, I was going to say, so I love what you just said, Carla. The other thing I would add to that is I would also just look at the description for the job itself and make sure you try to integrate those words or those skills. Obviously, if they're true, integrate the skills into the resume and cover letter, and make sure that you can be a little repetitive just to make sure that they pick up that you do have those skills. So just make sure that you integrate those into your cover letter. And then secondly, if you're looking for a job and you know somebody who has kind of either works in that field or works in that industry or that has that job, I would certainly reach out to them and ask them for, how you can either gain skills that you don't have or what they'd recommend, because part of this is just trying to find people who are maybe already have the job that you're looking to have, or might be able to offer some advice. And generally speaking, is people love, most people that I know love to meet with people and help them in their careers. So it's just something to try to broaden your network and try to find people that may be able to help you too. That's really important, I think.
That is a great comment. Thank you so much, Eric. And Jim, we'll go with you, and then we'll keep going with the other 5 tips or steps.
Thank you. Just 2 points here. Since Eric mentioned the sort of the tie to the cover letter, the one comment I was waiting to add is, in the structure of your cover letter, to me, the meat of it, really the most important middle part of the letter is the purpose is to directly connect your resume and the skills you're documenting on your resume with their job description. And so my strategy is always, in fact, whenever possible, I will take the job description, which is almost always online. I will copy and paste it into a draft cover letter. And but I'll delete most of it, except for if there's a list of qualifications, a list of skills. I will keep those in bullet format. And if the cover letter is short enough, I can fit it in, I will make sure that I address every skill somehow. It's not on my resume. That's when you look to say, well, what do I have that transfers, right? So, and the idea is obviously to take what look like the most important qualifications, and in your cover letter say, hey, I've got all of these. I am ready, right? That's kind of what it says when it's in the body of your cover letter. But in your resume, just think about it. Your resume is structured differently. So it's going to go job by job typically. And so your resume doesn't have to match that list. But when you're thinking about your resume, you may want to tailor it a little bit in terms of this, how you describe the skills or how you even describe the accomplishments, because you know what they're looking for in the job posting. So it was a little longer than you wanted.
No, no worries.
I had something else, but I'll think of it and I'll bring it up later. So thanks.
Sounds good. I think those are great points. Always looking at the job description and making sure that you're meeting what they're needing there. And that there are a couple things and a couple points that I want to touch base on and ask our mentors here, but I'll finish this slide and then we'll go to those. Explain your achievements and awards. That's important too. Like we were talking about making sure that you compare what you where the company was when you came and where it went after you leave or when you left. That's something important too, and making sure that you are putting your accomplishments there. Use a business format. Just make sure that you're being professional. We were talking about colors and graphics. You don't want your format of the resume to be to have too many graphics or to have many lines or things that can distract the recruiter, because they're gonna look more at the design of the resume than the explanation of your skills itself. So include keywords like Jim was mentioning. Grab those keywords or those skills from the description, from the job description, and that's going to help you build a better cover letter and resume. Review samples. I always look for samples for the same position. Like my best friend before ChatGPT is Google, so I'm always looking for examples and ideas on how other people did it. And like Eric mentioned too, when I am entering an industry, and it happened to me a few years ago, I used to work in the food industry for so long that it was very hard for me to transfer my skills. And when I started telling one of my friends that was helping me build a new resume, like, but I don't have experience in like community service. And then she asked, like, what did you do in the food industry? And I explained all the experience I had. She's like, there you have it. Like, it's always too good to say it out loud and share it with someone else, because, you know, I had management experience. I had program manager. I had HR, quality assurance experience, but I didn't know how to transfer that from the food industry to the community service field. And select a template. I always go with templates so I don't go wrong and I don't start making up things, because sometimes I tend to add too much to my resumes, but a template is a good way to keep me aligned with what I need to put. So I have a question, and I don't know if anyone with our mentors or John or Fabiola want to bring something up about these, but what do you guys think about short-term jobs? Like, and I'm talking very short. Should we include them in a resume? Should we add them? Like, I've seen resumes that have 2-week jobs or a month, you know, like, and to me, that tells me, especially when I used to do this in the food industry, that tells me people don't last long in their positions, and red flag for me. So I don't know if Esteban, you have something too.
Yeah, you know, I think all of this goes to, like, you really should know who you're giving the resume to, right? So if you just are using, you know, you might have a generic resume that you just kind of go for certain types of jobs, or even various versions of that. But if you're going for a job that you really want, it seems like you would want to know your audience really well, as much as possible. You might find out something like, you know, you might find out something personal about the person who's going to interview. You never know, you know, and you might find it out just by Googling something, right? And the other thing that you can use is Glassdoor and those other types of things like that, where people talk about, you know, their employment at particular places. And then I was going to say that about the 10 steps too. It seems like the order of these could depend on the employer as well, right? Like, right? And just so I don't keep talking, I have one last thing to say. But I would like people to comment on this last thing. which is, I kind of view this, and maybe not now, Carla, you know, but just at some point, that this is a useful process for a person looking for a job sometimes, right? It helps them find direction. It helps them find where they are sometimes in terms of, like, if they want something, it helps them find where they're at in that line, right? And so I think that's important for people to know.
Yeah, thank you, Esteban. Thank you for that. And yeah, that is true. Like, it depends on the industry that you're applying to. It depends, like Jim was telling us, higher education people might like super long resumes so that it talks about, you know, their experience and if they're really gonna be serving the students and the community that they're gonna be helping. But in most cases, a super long resume might not work that well. So any other comments on the short-term jobs? Does anyone has a comment on that? Yes, Jim.
Yeah. I guess I know I'm kind of giving the same answer a lot, but I think it kind of also depends. So I think that if the job you're targeting is more of an entry level, and that's a really hard word to describe. But if it's, you know, not sort of supervisory or management, and if it, I guess it also kind of depends on how extensive are the qualifications, right? If this is a job where, you know, you need to have a degree in accounting or something like that, then that's part of it. But the other part is, let's say you're a student, because Paulina, you're a student, right? Or no, did you say you were still in school? I apologize.
No, I help students.
I'm sorry. So I missed that. But so for a student or even somebody recently, you know, completing school, I think those short-term jobs could be more relevant and could show, you know, when I was in school, I did this as well, right? That sort of thing. I agree, though, that, Carla, if that's what you have, if it's a series of short-term jobs, that could be a problem. But if there's a specific short-term job, you know, I did a 6-week internship to learn about something, and and you still have accomplishments hopefully within it. I guess that's the other trick is even if it's 2 weeks, if you can point to a project or an accomplishment, then you might want to consider including it. Hopefully it's more of a shorter part of your resume and you have other work experience to highlight. So
that's true. And I was thinking about the resumes that I've seen that have, no, I don't know, like 6 or 7 short term, like 2 weeks each. So in the past year, that person has had 12 jobs. Like, really? Eric.
Yeah, thanks. I think, you know, back in the day, and I'm old, so for me it was like a no, you know, like don't put your short-term stuff. But I have to say it really seems to have kind of fallen out of favor to worry about that too much. But yeah, I mean, a 2-week position, I might not put that in, but certainly I don't worry too much about like seeing resumes where somebody's been at a place for 9 months or 7 months. And back years ago, we would say, you know, don't even put that in there. It demonstrates that you're just moving around. And I think people are realizing that people move around a lot nowadays. And so I don't really think of it as a detriment. So I'd certainly put in those short-term jobs if it kind of builds out a little bit more skills. It shows maybe determination to get involved in one particular area, and it kind of leads to something. I would really think that putting those in would be really beneficial. And again, I just feel like people are more understanding about situations that are going on and how things have changed. I mean, we hired a digital media person who was at her last job for less than 6 months, but that didn't freak us out because she also provided an explanation a little bit in the interview. So it was cool.
That is a great point, because I had a job that was a grant position. So it was based on a grant. It only lasted, the grant was only supposed to last, I think 3 or 4 months. And they offered me to extend my time because they saw the value that I was adding to the organization. And I ended up being there almost 6 months, like 5 months and a half. But I explained that, kind of like put it on my resume, but I also explained that on my next interview. So you're right, like that's a good point to think about. So that's good. So now let's talk about the other way around. What about gaps in your resume? I did, when I resigned to my job in the food industry and I started looking for community service work, I was off for almost 3 months. And not because I couldn't find a job, it's because I decided to do it like that. I planned my finances and my time. It was during the holidays, so I decided I'm gonna take the holidays off. I'm gonna go enjoy time with my family. And then when I come back, I'll start looking for a job. When I was closer to the third month, I was kind of freaking out because I'm like, okay, so you took time off and now you cannot find a job. But thankfully I did. But what do you guys think about the gaps? Should we explain about the gaps on our resume? Should we say, like, from this, 2.5 month period, I was taking my time to rethink myself or reimagine what I wanted to do? Is that good? Eric.
Yeah, I actually, again, I'm going to go back to like back in the day, like the old man here. Back in the day, you were taught not to do that. But, nowadays, like people taking care of elderly parents or kids, those gaps don't really, again, bother me or others that are reviewing resumes as much. And I love the idea of actually talking about it. Like we had somebody in our application process that submitted a resume and said that they took 7 months off to take care of an elderly parent. And to me, why not mention that? I mean, again, if somebody's too hung up on that and freaks out about that, probably don't want to work there, maybe. Yeah. If they're not letting you be a little bit more, having a personal life or a life, and they're not willing to kind of have you speak to your personality a little bit. I know it's tough, but I think it's just best maybe to walk away from that position if they truly were offended or freaked out about that. I don't see that would be a point to work there.
That is a great point. We have to have a work-life balance, and this is something that I've been thinking more and more as the planning of our career and internship expos in the upcoming months. Is we really want companies to show up, to be there, to tell employees or potential employees and job seekers what they have to offer. They're always asking the employees, what are you bringing to the company? What are your skills? Where is your resume? Did you write a cover letter? But really, be honest. What are you gonna offer to these employees? Are you gonna let them have a life balance? And are you gonna let them, have time off with their family? You have benefits. It's, all those things that when you are the employee or the job seeker are hard to ask, but I think we have the right to be asking those questions because that's going to be an impact on why committing to something that you're not going to feel comfortable working at. So that is a great point, Eric. Thank you for that. Jim.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with what both Eric and you have said, and I guess it led me to want maybe to consider volunteer work in two different ways. Volunteer work used to be, again, I'll go back with Eric's line, back in the day, because I think I'm actually older than you, Eric, but I do remember when volunteer work was something you put along with maybe awards, recognition, skills, those kinds of things. It was sort of de-emphasized. And I don't really think that is the case anymore. What I was really getting, I guess the reason I wanted to bring it in here is, one, include it, I think, in a way, and again, when you can focus on your accomplishments and what you did, then it is often taken quite seriously. The other is, though, building a resume and writing a resume is not the only piece here. So you need to be thinking about your future resume. So if you do have a gap, and I have had gaps, and filling some of that gap with volunteer work is not only a good way to explain it, it's going to mean something to a lot of employers. Just as Eric, you mentioned, if you're taking time to take care for aging family members and so forth, I did that. And I'm so old school that after I did it, I didn't really handle it that way. But looking back now, I absolutely would take that period and say, this is what I did.
Yeah, totally.
And so, yeah, I think that we have a changing culture. Might be a little bit difficult, but I think the good news is, I think more of those, when you can make the experience relevant to either an explanation of a gap or just relevant to your skills, take advantage of that, and yeah, don't be shy about including it.
That's true. And that was my next question, Jim. Thank you for touching based on that. Volunteer. I wanna share that. I don't know if you guys know these, if all of you know these, but in at least in Mexico, I don't know if it's whole Latin America, but at least in Mexico, volunteer work doesn't count. You cannot even put it on your resume. It is very, employers are very harsh, and maybe now it's changing. But back in the day, I remember my mom volunteering and helping some people, and she wasn't able to put it in her resume. Like I don't know. I didn't understand why, because she was helping and making a positive impact in so many people, but she wasn't able to put it. So I think that's something that is very different here now, and hopefully is changing in other countries. But that is amazing. That tells you a lot about not only the employee and the professional career, but also about the human being, what that person cares about, and how that is going to move your company forward. So that's a great point. Thank you so much for that. So we're going to go to our next slide. And the big no's, and we were talking already about these, the big no's, and maybe they're not no's anymore. Maybe they're a maybe, or maybe they're like, they have to have an explanation. But when writing a resume, do not include irrelevant information. And when we talk about irrelevant information, don't include personal information just yet. Like when you're gonna talk about yourself is during the interview, when they ask you about it. You don't want to put too much on the resume about that. I remember when I built my first resume when I was like right after high school, I put that I was living with my parents and my aunt, and I did all this explanation, and my friend was like, no. You're not telling them your life story. You're telling them that you want to work. Don't use personal pronouns. And I don't know if Esteban or someone else can help us with this part. Like, what are the personal pronouns they don't look good on a resume? Does anyone has?
I don't know. It seems kind of weird to me because it makes you think about yourself in the third person when you write the resume. It's just kind of weird.
Yeah.
But I just know that that's really. It would seem odd if I received one that said I and all of that. Maybe. I mean, I've never seen one that did that. I could say that. But I don't know why. Like, does anybody here?
Jim?
I'll take a shot at this. I think it's more important to focus first on consistency. So I don't personally use pronouns, or I don't say I, but I actually don't write complete grammatically correct sentences as a result. I write bullets. And one thing so I mentioned this earlier, but every single bullet in my resume, if I'm talking about, if it's in my experience, starts with a verb in the past tense, or if it's my current job, then it starts with a verb in the present tense, usually, unless it is a project I've already completed. But I don't say I led or I organized, or I don't, and I try to find very active verbs for every single one. But I just say led a project to create guided pathways. So that's something I did at Front Range, right? And so, and I don't always, and I try to, Carla, you mentioned this before, I don't use Chat GPT at this point, but I try not to use the same active verb, and that can be challenging sometimes when you're a project manager or something like that. Manage project too. But I think that's more important. I think it's a bit of a personal choice. If you wanted to say consistently, I led, I handled customer service, I think that would be okay, but it makes each bullet just a couple of characters longer and might lead to some hard choices elsewhere, because I think you want to keep things brief. So I don't think I would, if I were reading a resume and it was consistent at least, and I saw personal pronouns, I don't think that would turn me off.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Eric.
Yeah, I was always taught, so the cover letter is really your opportunity to get your personality to shine a little bit more and maybe take that personal pronoun approach. Whereas the resume, for practical standpoints, it's not only that it's kind of a bad look to use the personal pronouns in a resume, but also just from a practical standpoint, if you put, I led a team of blah, blah, I accomplished blah, blah, it would just pack it so full that a resume it's actually a really odd way of structuring sentences where you say completed work every day, or accomplished a $20 million or achieved a $20 million increase in revenue. It's kind of a wonky way of writing things that makes it easier and compact. And that's really kind of where the form derived from. It's not, it wasn't it was really shortened, years and years ago. And prior to that, people would write out like kind of paragraphs and stuff. And really, it was just much a better way to like get the information down and to not have it kind of just be a big ego trip. And to really look at like, it's like you're presenting, you worked in teams, you work collaboratively, you're not taking full responsibility. You actually are giving, some graciousness to kind of accomplishing things, but you're also recognizing that you did it collectively in some ways. You didn't just do it all yourself.
That's correct. Yep. Thank you so much for that. So the next one, I really like the next one because a lot of people tend to lie on their resumes, and a lot of people. And that is something that can be of benefit at the time of the hiring process. But then at the end, it always shows, it always shows that you don't have the experience. Even when it comes to the interview, like sometimes people lie so much on their resumes when you ask them, they don't remember the lie they did. Esteban, you have a comment?
Yes, don't lie, don't exaggerate. Oh my God. I used to like hire people and stuff, and this would just infuriate me. I mean, I actually, like if I would say something like, like they would say something like, super expert at, all Microsoft products or something, right? And then I would realize while working that I knew more than they knew about these things, that they were completely ignorant about things they said on their resume. It was just really bizarre. And it just made it very, I didn't want to fire the person, so I had to pay to get the person trained.
Exactly. I think it's better to be honest and say, either on your resume or when you have an interview, to say, I don't know, but I can learn. I'm a fast learner, or I have basic experience, but I can be proficient with the right guidance, in whatever skill or requirement or task that they're asking you. Eric, do you have something? Oh, sorry, Esteban.
I was gonna say, you could say something like, I use, like, this is more, I can learn more from this. Use Microsoft Word, 4 hours a day, right? That tells me a lot more than I'm an expert at it, right?
Correct.
So anyway, that was all.
Eric.
Yeah, so don't lie. But one thing I do want to stress, though, it's kind of the reverse, is that don't dumb down your experience or your accomplishments. Because, and especially I'd say women, and especially I think take this more gracious approach of like, I helped do this rather than I did do this. Like, for instance, I helped manage and lead this team rather than you did manage this team. And somebody taught me that a long time ago, where they looked at my resume and they said, I'm glad that you're all collaborating, but you actually need to take ownership on this. You actually did do this. And I think sometimes people just, it's not a lying, but don't really just say, don't be afraid of saying you did do something. You did accomplish that. you did achieve that. It might have been in a team, but maybe you led the team, or maybe you were instrumental in making that happen. So don't be shy in taking ownership for it too.
That's true. Thank you so much for that. Jim.
Yeah, Eric, I'm so glad you said that, because the follow-up there might be, you may not have the title, but don't let not having the title prevent you from truly claiming what you did. So maybe you didn't have the title of project manager, but you're on the project team. You know which tasks you took ownership of. You know what you, not only what the team accomplished, which you want to mention that, right? But how you led your piece is still legitimate leadership, legitimate management. And I think and I think it carries through the interview as well, because you can have the confidence because you know exactly which tasks, and you also know maybe if the project manager really wasn't all that good and you ended up doing a lot of the leadership, that's a little harder to manage. But I agree. Take a close look and be as within the bounds of, don't lie, but be proud of what you did and think of it that way, and place it that way, right? Don't just say, yeah, don't minimize it by saying, well, I wasn't the project leader, so I can't say I led this. Well, maybe you can, right? There are leaders come in all shapes, and so do managers, right? So you don't have the title of manager. You could still manage things.
Correct. That's true. Thank you so much for bringing that up, both of you, because yeah, that's important to taking credit for the good things that we've done. And that happens a lot with, like Eric mentioned, women and underserved communities that we feel we sometimes we feel like don't belong or cannot be part of something big or something important because we have never seen someone that looked like us in a position like that, or the leader that we had didn't look at all like us or act with our principles or our values, and we ended up doing all the jobs. So that's important. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And we are running short on time here, but I just want to make sure that we touch base on the following points. Don't use a small font, especially for people that we wear glasses. Most of us here wear glasses. It's very hard to print a paper, to be in front of the computer with a teeny tiny font. So don't do that. Don't include personal information or your picture. And this is something that we talked about earlier. It's sad, but people judge you by your picture right away. It's better that if they want to see how you look, to look for you on LinkedIn, and that you have a professional headshot like we did a couple of weeks ago, but don't include your picture in your resume. You don't want people to throw away your resume for the way you look. And believe me, there are people that do that. So don't leave unexplained gaps in your employment. And this is something we were talking earlier. I think if it's a couple weeks or a few weeks, doesn't make that much difference. But if it's months, just explain them. And like we talked before, it's okay to have gaps for whatever reason. Just make sure that you have an explanation for it. And don't include salary information. Don't tell on your resume how much you were making or how much you want to make. They might be able to give you more than what you think, and then you're gonna set yourself for less if you include that information. So make the let them make a proposal, and then you'll decide if that's enough for the job that you're gonna be doing. And Q&A. I know Paulina and I have been asking questions throughout this presentation. I'm gonna stop the recording, and I'm gonna let Paulina ask questions if she has any.
Are you going to stop recording, you said?